So sorry about that.
That's right.
We were having a really good conversation too, and I don't know what went on with my computer, but we were talking about the contact days in the state of Wisconsin, and kind of you and I were both in agreement. Five is too few, but anything more than 10 or 12, we think is just it's too much. We both were agreement. It's too much. Let the kids be kids a little bit, and um,
And I
not,
think that's the big part of it that kind of gets
yeah,
lost in everything, right? Because like you want your program to do well, you want your other schools and your program to do well, but these kids have so many other things on their plate as far as camps, just being kids.
right.
It's we always want to make sure that that's kind of in the forefront of what we're thinking as far as the contact days and summer availability.
Yeah. Well, and also, like we said, there's going to be somebody that abuses it, right? Like somebody's going to take it and they're going to run 12-hour practices and do all these kind of things, and then it's unfair for everybody else who doesn't get to or doesn't follow that practice and wants to be helpful to the entire community. So, um,
Right.
it's I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how the vote goes though for sure because I know there's from what I understood last time, the sort of old guard wanted to keep it at five. Um, the younger generation wanted more, and then there's guys like you and I who are kind of stuck in the middle that just want to see some sort of change. So
Correct. Correct.
yeah, I think if they go unlimited, I think it's going to be a bad move.
I think we'll see some kickback. I think people will be really excited the first time, and
Yeah,
and they'll have all these plans of grandeur and everything like that. And then after a year, like, yeah, that didn't work.
yeah,
So, I hope there's not too many natural consequences with that, both for the kids and the coaches. But
yeah,
this is one where I don't think you necessarily rip the band-aid off. It's much easier to like, in my view, to increment, up the increment a little bit, see like, all right, how does that feel? Do we want more? Is this number good? Rather than just go, okay, no rules, go nuts type thing.
right,
And
absolutely.
to
Yeah,
be
I
fair, I
agree.
think that's usually how most things operate.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully it's they put some thought into it and there's a good middle ground for everybody. But um well, let's talk some football stuff. So obviously this is an offensive line kind of geared podcast still is. It's kind of evolved a little bit, but talk to me about how the offensive line played a role in some of the better teams that you've been a part of.
Oh, it's huge. I think it's the single most important coach on your staff. And I have come and worked with some great line coaches who have brought up to the level of buy-in. And to me, that's the most important part, right? Because you have kids at this level who they want to score the touchdowns, they want to get their name called, they want to wear the fun jerseys. But we all know that if the line doesn't open gaps and if the line doesn't give you time, then it doesn't matter how great your skill position players are,
Right.
you're not going anywhere. So to me, the best line coaches are the ones who get the most buy-in from the kids, who are get the kids excited to be linemen.
Right.
And that seems weird, right? And there's no other real position in sports where you're trying to necessarily talk about buy-in for a position, but there's no other position in sports like the offensive line.
Right. Yeah.
And
No,
so
100%. Yeah.
like in McFarland, where we have now, Robert Cunningham is our O-line coach, and he's fantastic. And one of the things that he does is he's kind of created his own little subculture within our team. They have their own little acronyms, their own little nickname, their own pancake sticker, where he makes it that this is a really neat thing that you get to be a part of because you're an offensive lineman. I think
Right.
that's such a cool way to do it. Because he said you always have to fight the public perception when you're a lineman, right? It's always the giving, giving, giving versus the taking, taking, taking that encompasses so much of our society as a whole, and that's what makes it the greatest position in sports.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, you're not going to get any argument from me there. It truly is. It truly is though, but like and you've been around long enough and you've seen I'm sure highs and lows and I'm sure if you look at that and really kind of boil it down to on the really good teams, the offensive line not only played well, obviously, but probably got along really well. Were close friends. Were spending time together outside of football, and that's at least I know from my perspective, my end of things, those have been the teams that are really, really fun too. When those guys are, if you see one of them, you see three of them.
Correct.
And that's kind of that's the cool stuff. That's the culture stuff that we as coaches preach nonstop that they kind of
Correct.
do it on their own.
Well, and that's the living embodiment of it, right? Like you have a position that even though you have five different guys, they have to act in unison
Right.
versus anybody else, and getting on that same page where you can't always assume that everybody's going to like each other, but respect each other. And what can you do to cultivate that culture?
Yeah.
Um, I know our quarterbacks coach Derek Schwarting talked about when he was in school. This is probably 5, 6 years ago. He's a young buck, but he said his linemen were around him all day during school. Like, hey, this is the quarterback. We're making sure nobody messes with the quarterback. And anything where gets in his way or gets knocked down, like that's a personal affront to them.
Yeah.
And when you get that mindset of a group that just so buys into what's best for the team, like you said, that's when special things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, those are fun groups to be around too. I mean it's funny you say that. We've got a quarterback here or here. We've got a quarterback at Kettle Moraine who when I started to take notice in the summer a little bit because I noticed he always lifted with the linemen.
Hmm.
And that to me, I was like, oh, this kid kind of he gets it, right?
Right.
And that's it's a leadership piece without even trying to have to do anything extra. It's just it's like Jim McMahon. I mean, obviously I'm a Bears fan, so you can cringe a little bit, but
Right.
he always went and hung out with the linemen and did all those things with the linemen and it makes them protect a little bit longer. They're going to give that extra second of pass protection, or they're going to, do that extra a bit of effort to make sure that he gets the success he needs. And they're just doing it for each other, and that's the cool part too. So
Yeah, absolutely. And one of my favorite things, and that we preach here at McFarland, is you celebrate with your guys.
yeah,
And so there's nothing cooler for us to watch on tape if we have like a touchdown downfield and you have guys celebrating, but you have the five linemen are all rush to each other, hugs, high fives, everything like that, and then shoot down the field to catch somebody else. Like to me, that's who you want to celebrate with your guys,
yeah,
but you want to look for those guys right next to you first, and then make sure everybody else gets acknowledged as well.
yeah. No, yeah. It's fun. It's fun to be around. Do you coach O line? I don't know. Do you?
Nope, nope. We have Robert Cunningham as
Oh,
our
you
O
said that.
line
Yeah, yeah.
coach. The very common O line coach, pole vault coach, math teacher combo. So
Oh,
he's got his own weird stuff that I just let him
yeah,
go to town with. But he and Corey Mackey run our O line in McFarland. They're fantastic.
yeah. It's always fun. It's as so I know for me. And this is kind of lead into my next question. When I was a head coach, it was hard for me to not gravitate towards the O line. Like I,
Hmm.
I I just I've always done it. That's always kind of been what I've done, what I've been, who I've been. And so when I would hire or bring in an O line coach, it always was tough for me to like not start kind of inching that way and let them be coaches. So I'm sure there's I mean obviously there's plenty of offensive line coaches who are head coaches at the high school level and even some at the college level. So it can be done, but it's you want to devote so much attention to that group
Right,
and then you feel like you're you know doing a disservice to everybody else. So it can be kind of that struggle a little bit with uh, splitting it up.
right. Well, on the flip side of that, as ROC, I don't have a position group, which is I'm very fortunate that I get to then float during offensive time and everything
Yeah.
like that. But it's such a great comfort knowing that Robert and Mac have that taken care of,
Yeah.
that I don't constantly have to hover like, oh, are we going to do this right? Or is this going
Right.
to get installed right? That I'm able to bounce and kind of make myself seen everywhere. And it helped, Robert's room is two door downs from mine. So there's never a passing period like, so what do you think about this? Or how do we draw this up?
Right.
So just that constant back and forth is really a benefit for the program.
Yeah. No, it's that's the cool part about being a football coach. I mean, I was just talking to our head coach today, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna come by your room tomorrow and talk about some things." He was like, "Can't wait, I love it." So it's
Right.
that's the fun stuff.
And you're
Did
very lucky.
so
Max, one of the good ones over there.
he definitely is, that's for sure. Like he knows the stuff, and he would talk football. We just had the other day. We were on Friday. Um, he texted me. It was we get out of school at 2:35, and he shot me a text at like 10 after 3 and was like, "Hey, you still here?" And uh, he had a coach coming in to kind of do a little interview. And we sat down in there, and the next thing I know, I looked at my clock and it was 5 o'clock, and I was like, "Oh, I
Right.
gotta go, man! Like, I can't stay here." And he's like, "Oh, he didn't realize it either." So,
Right.
um, but those are fun conversations too. I'd take those any day of the week. So,
Absolutely.
um, so I gotta ask, head coach for 8 seasons.
Mhm.
Um, did did you find any? Did you have any struggles this year going kind of taking a step back and not being the head coach? Did you find things were easier? Did you find things were harder, or did you find things were just a lot more, I guess, smooth with your transition from taking a step back from being the head coach?
Yeah, there were both for sure. I hadn't had tell I haven't been told no in 8 years on
Right.
anything football related. And then the first time we're like, well, that's weird.
Yeah.
But it was obviously something that Paul and I, when we talked about the fit, we're well aware of, like, what, there's going to be some times where I might push for something that I haven't had to necessarily discuss before and what that's going to
Right.
look like. The best thing that made this transition possible was the staff here at McFarland.
Sure.
And I was unbelievably lucky in that after about 2 weeks, I told my wife, I said, I feel like I've been here forever. And when you have that group of dudes,
Yeah.
that makes everything else kind of fall into place. Was it seamless? No, there were times where Paul and I would clash a bit just on what I would like to do in a situation, and he has the big key card, and I say, okay, and that's
Right.
how it goes. But the reason that worked is because he and I talked up front and said, like, hey, there are going to be times in the heat of the headset we're going to say something, and we know that that's not what we mean, but that's part of how this goes.
Right.
Um, but there, it was really interesting. I didn't have a parent call this year. I haven't been 8 years since I didn't have a parent call.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so there is a lot of truth in what they say is you get to coach a lot more.
Yeah.
And that part was fun, but there's also parts of you that nag. You're like, I really miss this part of it or setting this up. I was constantly aware of trying to say, well, we did this before, knowing that I was the one new guy and a coach of a staff of 13, where, like, I don't want to be the guy like, well, we tried this, do this, that type of stuff. So
Right.
trying to find where that fits in there.
Right. Well, and I know from my experience, I used to get so frustrated when I was a head coach and somebody would say, "Well, we used to do this or we this work,"
Right.
and so me going in the same situation as you a little bit, where I would say in my mind, I would have to kind of think of how to word it, where it wasn't like, "Well, we should try this," or "We did this and this worked for us." I have to, you have to think about your words a little bit more
Mhm.
carefully, just because you don't want to come off exactly what you're saying. You don't want it to come off that way. Um and
Right. Because
go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I've always referred to us as we. So
Hmm.
like even if I'm talking about my first year coaching in 2007, I'm going to refer to it as we. Like that's just how I do things, and so I didn't want that also to come off as like, well, he's still stuck at where he was. He hasn't
Right.
progressed to we're now the we. So that's just a bad habit that I notice on my own accord, where it's like I refer to everybody I've ever coached as we.
Right.
So it's just a strange thing, but yeah,
Well,
I feel the same way you do a little bit with some of that stuff.
and for my thing, so I came in, was fortunate to get brought on as OC, and Paul had said from the jump, we want you to install your stuff, your offense. So
Hmm.
so not only am I the new guy in 13 dudes, I am now completely overhauling everything you guys have done
Right.
for X amount of years with stuff that you haven't seen before.
Right.
new verbiage, the whole everything. And in my mind, like, this is my baby, right? Like, I've crafted this out over X amount of years. I have faith in it. I've seen it work and everything like that. You don't know it from any scheme that you've just seen on Madden, right? Like, this is a whole thing.
Right.
So not only am I like defending it, but I also have to sell it and go against what has been done over there. So I keep praising the staff there, but they're such good dudes. It wasn't at any point what you've done versus us. It's like, all right, this is new. How can we do it? It's going to be weird. But just complete buy-in to wanting to make the experience better for the McFarland student athlete. And in that
Right.
regard, I'm extremely lucky. And it made the transition so much smoother than it could have been.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm very similar with you in the same regards with Mac. Like, and Mac, I always joke with Mac. It's 2020, 2025 now. Mac's been trying to hire me for like 8 years. I mean, I can go back through our Twitter messages, from and he would reach out to me or I would reach out to him, and so when my situation went down, um, he was the first person I reached out to when it all happened and said, "Hey, if here's what's going on. If this happens, are you, can we have a talk?" And he's, absolutely. And so and then when I got to, I'm very lucky in your and same as your regard. Mac and I think almost the exact same. And so it was great to kind of sit down and be able to spitball things and be on the same page with a lot of stuff. And um, so that was very lucky. I'm glad we were very both lucky in that regard and able to make things work for the best. Do you do you have any interest in becoming a head coach again down the road, or are you very, very, very happy what you're doing?
It's both. So I landed in a wonderful spot. And it's one that I am not looking to leave.
Yeah,
You never know what the next day says or what the next posting is going to be.
sure.
And if there was anything that I took away from my whole time of transitioning away from Deerfield to McFarland, it's what you think is going to happen tomorrow may not at all be there. So I have really tried to just keep my options open. I've been upfront with looking at down the road. I'll keep you in the loop, but I'm really happy where I'm at, and I'm really lucky in that regard.
Yeah, that's
So if
good. I
something
mean,
if something comes down the road that interests me, we'll see.
right.
But as far as in today, I'm working at being the OC at McFarland and working to have a really exciting fall season for us.
No, good. That's good. That's and it's nice to have that comfort level too, right? Where you
Right.
don't have to worry about what's going on next year and what's going to happen. So that's good. That's a good thing. Going taking it way back now. Did you when you graduated high school and started college, did you play college football?
No, I wasn't very good.
Okay.
Um,
Neither was
I
I, but I still played.
Yeah, I really wish I was good enough to play and everything like that, but I was average at absolute best.
Okay. So did you kind of have in the back of your mind getting out of high school that you wanted to be a coach? Or did something happen kind of along the way that set you down the path?
Yeah, I did. It was always something that I had thought about. My dad coached me for years across everything. So that was kind of something that always happened in our family, and I had kind of helped out with like little brothers,
Sure.
little league teams, and basketball teams of that nature. But I was always pretty sports geeky
Okay.
in the sense of like the fantasy football early back when you had to like look for the stats in like the USA Today. That was a big thing.
Yep.
Trying to break down the stats. My buddy and I, Jeff Klaus, he's a super successful baseball coach over at Beloit Turner, and they had this front office football game where you kind of put your teams together and play. Like that was our super nerdy way to hang out and everything like that. So it
Yeah.
was always kind of in the back of my mind. And then my first class at Whitewater, I was a Phi Ed major. I had Stan Zwiefel's intro to football class, intro
Okay.
to coaching football class
Okay.
as one of my electives. My mother was not pleased. But after like the first or second class with that, I'm like, this is it. This is what
Yeah.
I want to be doing.
Yeah.
And so that was a big, big drive for me. And so I wasn't really sure. And I like to tell this story because I'm always very fond of volunteer coaches. So
Yep.
I was in school, I was in college, married. My wife had graduated and she was teaching second grade at Johnson Creek. And I had really wanted to get in. I just bitten by the coaching bug. I'm like, I just don't know how to get in.
Right.
So I took the super masculine approach of having my wife ask Tim Wagner, the coach at the time, still the coach, if he was looking for any volunteer help.
Yep.
So, super foot through the door, announced my present. No, it was
Yeah.
very meekly asking my wife to help me out. And to Tim's credit, he said, "Yep, we're always looking for help." And that was 2010. And I said, and I've been 2009, and I've been coaching high school football ever since. So,
Yeah. It's funny how we all get into it, right? Like I had no plans on ever coaching, and I remember going. I think if I really think about it, if I got into coaching because I had one of my best friends in high school was going to coach
okay.
at our alma mater, and it pissed me off that he was going to coach and I wasn't because I was like, I know football so much better than him,
Sure.
and so I went to talk to the head coach who was one of our assistants when we both played. And he told me, hey, he was like, come out for a day and see what you think. And I went out for a day and I remember he grabbed me after, was like, yeah, you're gonna do this. This is what you should be doing. And he was still my coach. So I, okay, yes, sir. And
Right.
went down that path. But it's funny you talk about the intro to football class because I took a very similar class my freshman year at Augustana in Rock Island, taught by John Furlong. And Bob Reed, the longtime legendary head coach at Augustana, had written a book, like the book that we followed in class, Bob Reed wrote. And I love that book. And so I like 2 or 3 years ago, I found it again online and bought it. And it's such a I can't remember the name of it now, which is terrible. But it's such a good like intro to coaching book. And it's got some, it's got some culture things in it and some fun stuff like that. But it's funny I took the same class and it was a good time. But I didn't at that time I didn't have any idea what the hell I wanted to do with it. I think it was just trying to get
Right.
an elective and get some credits. So
Right. And it's funny how some of those happenstance things happen and what they lead with and how they lead you with that.
yeah,
So obviously, we do a lot of stuff at the high school level while kids getting ready for school and next careers and stuff like that.
yeah,
And so we tie it into, and I'll tell them that story. Like I didn't know what I was necessarily do. I had a very big list of things I didn't want to do
yeah,
once I got to college. Like I'm soft, as you can tell right now. Like the manual labor, all that stuff. Like I don't want to do that. My dad was an accountant, math not my forte, so I had a much smaller list of things that I did not want to do,
yeah.
and that's kind of how you fall into that sort of thing if you keep your eyes open.
Right. And again, it's sometimes, we take the long way around to figure out what we want to do, but we
Right.
eventually find it. Everyone eventually finds what you want to do. It just sometimes might take a couple of years and then you're on your way.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, last question I got for you, Coach. If you could build an offensive line, a Mount Rushmore of offensive linemen, from guys you coached, guys you played with, or guys you were just a casual fan of growing up, who would be on that five-man offensive line?
Oh, that's a good question. So of guys I've coached, I will throw on his name was Nick Vandergritten. He was a guard my first 2 years in Deerfield, and just one of the most naturally strong kids I've ever seen, and
Yep.
just brilliant kid. And he was our weight room go-to guy. So like if Nick had a good lifting session, we all had a good lifting session.
Okay.
And so I love to tell the story. I coached Nick, his younger brother, and everything like that. This was before the referendums in Deerfield, and the weight room was just an upstairs, tucked away, terrible little place.
Yeah.
And I said, Nick, we got a big game coming up. I need you to go. I need you to set the pace today. And he could kind of be aloof. He's like, okay, all right. And so we're about halfway through our work on, and Nick saunters up there. He's 6 foot, 6'1", 290,
Yeah.
just strong as an ox. And he walks in with these white Crocs, throws on 405 to the deadlift. So, all right, here we go. And just 6 times, no warm up, no nothing. Place goes crazy. Everybody's flying around. And VG is like, is that what you're looking for? Yep. Yeah, Nick, that'll do it. Thank you.
That'll do.
Yeah. And so for that story, he was defensive player of the year. He is a great kid. He could have gone to play like low D1 ball, and I constantly tried to get him to go a little bit.
Hmm.
But he was my first lesson that also the kids have to want to be recruited
Sure.
and want to go that step. And he said, Sweegs, I'm gonna go be an engineer and make six figures. And yeah, if he's an engineer making six figures, I'm like, Nick, that's a really good way to figure it out as well. That's
Yeah,
so love that kid to death.
that's awesome.
As far as growing up watching, I mean Joe Thomas, right, for a Wisconsin kid
Yeah.
to see what he's doing. And then his post transformation, right, with like what he looks like now and like losing the
Dude's
weight and everything like that,
dude's
like it's
jacked. He looks
crazy,
like a freaking tight end.
right?
He could probably go suit up right now and be a blocking tight end for some half the probably more than half the teams in the NFL and be real successful.
And I think he's on there because he does a lot of that stuff with like the trench training right now. So I know
Yeah.
in McFarland we're fortunate to have like 4 to 5 kids who are going to that, and they come back raving that he doesn't hold himself like he's wearing a gold jacket better than anybody else. Like he's in the drills, he's doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
Giving back. I mean, that's the coolest thing. I mean, for any of these kids, he's like, I'm doing a drill with Joe Thomas. Like, are you kidding
Right.
me? That's crazy.
Right. Yeah. That's it's I mean I'm friends with Joel Nellis and like I couldn't even imagine I'm such a fanboy. So like when I
Right,
see these things like that's Joe Thomas. Like
right.
that's like I would just be in awe. I don't know how some of these kids do it. I would be like frozen in my shoes in awe of who I'm around. So
I always do like the Nick Chris Farley, Paul McCarthy,
oh
Saturday Night
yeah.
Live sketch. Like, remember when you were the Beatles? That was
Yeah.
awesome. That's exactly what I would do.
Yeah.
Nothing would get done. It would just be me just staring.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Let's see, other guard. So Alan Faneca, I thought was a phenomenal football player. He was guard for the Steelers for years.
Hmm.
I remember reading an article where they were just throttling somebody, and basically across the line, he told Faneca, like, if you guys run counter one more time, I'm just tapping myself out. And Faneca's like, yeah, we're running it again. He said the guy just tapped himself out. Like, that's my relatable story to the sense of like just whooping that guy enough. He's like, I literally just don't want any more of anything with this.
Yeah. He was a good he doesn't get talked enough about enough. He's another one that made the lost like 150 pounds when he stopped playing football, like Joe Thomas did. And started running like ultra marathons or something, like some
Right.
crazy stuff.
Josh Sitton is one from local or Green Bay guy for whoever I thought was always criminally underrated.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm not a
And
Packers fan, but he was a fun one to watch.
he always had a great quote. And I think about it when anytime we talk about moving guys from like left or right side of the line because we think it's such a seamless transition. When he went to the Dolphins, they were asking about flipping from like left guard to right guard or vice versa, and like how difficult he was. He's like, it's kind of the same, but it's also like wiping your backside with the wrong hand.
Yep,
Like
I
you
remember
can
that
do it,
quote.
but
I
it doesn't
remember that.
necessarily feel like that's what you should be doing.
Yeah.
And I always get that in my head. I'm like, no, maybe flipping this guy to the other side isn't going to go as seamlessly as we think it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that quote too. Yeah, I remember reading that. That's fun. It's funny.
And then, this is my own personal list. Mark Tauscher at the other tackle spot, right? Like
Okay.
your Wisconsin guy who went to the state pro team and then comes back and gives so much to the university. Obviously
Mhm.
there's true gold jacket guys, but as far as like guys who have impacted me, who I've noticed and seen, somebody who just bleeds Wisconsin, and for a Wisconsin kid, that's such a cool thing to see.
Yeah. No, he was a good one too. He the one that he was the one that got the infamous hit from Warren Sapp, right? Was that
I think that
Tauscher?
was Chad Clifton.
Was that Clifton? Okay. I knew they were the tackles for the Packers
Yep,
at the time. I can
bookends for
never remember.
years.
Okay. Yeah, he was a good one too. I liked and again, I'm not a Packers fan, but I do remember they always had good offensive linemen, especially with when Tauscher and Clifton were playing and you had Sitton still in there too and um yeah, they had some good groups of guys there playing on the O line, but anyways. Well, Coach, I appreciate you coming on, man. Do me a favor, let the listeners know your Twitter handle and any other information you need them to know before we get you out of here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I think these types of talks and just being able to talk ball with other coaches is what makes this profession such a cool thing.
Mm,
Coach Sam Hernandez is a good buddy of mine, the DC at Marshall. We used to have talked about the ability through social media to send a message to a random person,
yeah,
and all of a sudden you're 20 minutes deep in line conversation, and now you look for him at future clinics and stuff like that. And
yeah,
I think that's just such a great part of football coaches that more people need to take advantage of, because you have so many people, even your quote unquote rivals within your conference. So like, we just want to talk ball and make kids have a better experience. And what's cooler than that, right?
yeah, absolutely. Amen.
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter, so it's at dsweg, DSWEG. Like I said, my email's on the McFarland School website if anybody ever wants to reach out and talk ball. Said, Tony, this is such a cool thing you're doing, and thanks so much for having me be a part of it.
No, I appreciate you coming on. Sorry we had the little snafu earlier, and
Right.
enjoy the rest of the day, man. Start feeling better, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Talk before the season starts, and best of luck to you.
Yep. Take care. I'm sure we'll see you at the clinic. So
All
go
right, man.
Spartans.
Yeah. All right, we'll see you.
Take care.